Namaste and welcome to this digital exclusive on the right perspective. I'm Anand Narasimhan, and with me is environmentalist, author, and someone who's done a lot of comprehensive work on water, Mridula Ramesh. And this is a book called Watershed. It's got some raving reviews by some of the top, not just business minds, but also those who are concerned about us and our future and whether or not it will be sustainable without water. Mridula ji, namaste. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. First up, congratulations on your book, and I think it is well timed. There are like here on News18 network, we've been doing a campaign for the last 3 years called Mission Pani, and the whole idea is to try and get the awareness going as far as conserving water and also looking at the Sustainable Development Goals SDG 6, so water and sanitation for all. But you have traversed the length and breadth of the country. So you have gone there, you've done a lot of hard work. So talk us through the process.
Um, so, Anand, thank you first for having me on the show. It's very kind of you. And the way I got introduced to the subject is not through the length and breadth of the country, but at my own home when we ran out of water in 2013. So, day zero really came home and we were complete ignoramuses. And I detailed the journey in my book. But it was because we didn't understand India's water, right? This India's water is this special thing that we once understood, right? It has certain facets, and we once understood it, and we adapted to it. And the understanding led to management, and management led to both wealth and resilience. And today, like so many others, I'd forgotten about it, and we didn't respect it, and that brought us to a state of crisis. Um, and once we started looking at water and said, okay, what is it and how do we deal with it and how do we adapt ourselves around it rather than letting water shape to us, we shaped ourselves to water, we built resilience in our own lives. So much so that in the worst drought that Madurai has had in over 140 years, uh, we were lucky enough not to buy water, right? So that's the message of the book, really. We had a functional relationship. We've disrespected it, which has now brought us to a dysfunctional relationship. And resetting that relationship is very important as the climate changes. And throughout the length and breadth of the country, the shared lack of respect is manifesting itself as different crises. You know, whether it be in the Northwest, Northeast, Chennai, Bangalore, Maharashtra, you name it.
True, I agree with you. And I've seen it physically because I went to Hampi and the farmers are using the canal systems and they're trying to dredge them out and use it, improve it, what was built during the Vijayanagara kingdom. So it was amazing for me to see. You talked about Jaisalmer and how in the past they used to have these bunds which they would build, and they had a method of trying to conserve groundwater. And while having this conversation with Sadhguru, he was also saying that it's not that India doesn't get adequate water. India gets enough of its water because 96% of our water comes from the skies or rainfall. But we don't stop the water. हम पानी रोकते नहीं हैं. This is something which even the Jal Shakti Minister Gajendra Shekhawat said कि हमारे पास पानी कम नहीं है, हम पानी को रोकते नहीं. We allow the water to go. We don't stop it, and it's not somewhere in the conversation for all of us. And do you agree with this that the olden methods or the traditional methods were to not just reroute water, but also ensure that we have a huge catchment of groundwater? Is that where our biggest challenge is, that all those natural, even man-made reservoirs which were there across our country, they have all somehow dried up, and we've forgotten the importance of these ponds and lakes and reservoirs.
Yeah, absolutely, Anand. I think if you look at it, again in the Chola kingdom, during a coronation, when everybody was praising the Chola king, Avvayar, who was an ancient Tamil poetess,
Yeah.
stood up and said, Varapuyara, right? Varapuyara really means raise a bund. And why is storing water and storing water underground so central to India's water? It is because India's water is so highly variable, so much so than water in the rest of the world, right? Because we get most of our water from the monsoon, it has certain facets, right? It's Jaisalmer, the district of Jaisalmer gets about 165 millimeters of water, But across the country, you get 5 meters of water in parts of the Northeast,
Wow.
right? It's seasonally variable. It's most of India's water falls in just 100 hours, right? But our demand is year round. The moment you put those facts together, you say, look, we need storage. And we got it once, and it has to be distributed. Just because how variable water is across the country, you have to have distributed storage, which is what our Aries or our Talabs, your Johards, they all got it and they did that. Uh, there is another point which I make in the book, that it's not just enough to build water resilience. You have to build a story around it, which any measure that builds water resilience provides regular, repetitive, tangible cash flow and benefits to its surrounding community. Otherwise, the community is not going to be vested in preserving it. And tanks used to do that, and I go through it extensively in the book, and that's what our institute has studied also. But today, many tanks in urban areas don't do that, which is why they may be failing.
Is it because in this entire thing of urbanization or building structures, encroaching upon river systems, and also redirecting river systems, the traditional courses of the rivers were altered, and that had diabolical impact on certain regions. We also see states which, like Maharashtra, which on the one hand are battling flood, and the meantime there are other regions which have drought. I am also reminded of Chennai, which has got a labyrinth of canals built during the British times. But
Yeah.
those canal systems, those water beds, you have an airport at a water bed, you have a flare, another Velacheri is a case in point, and then there are encroachments galore. How is it that we bring this consciousness? Because this is now, it's about living. You can't remove those people who are already there. How do you
Yeah,
resettle them?
precisely.
It's a
No,
big
no,
issue.
no. It's a naughty problem. See, again, I think the problem originated in the British, right? The British, there were three levels, right? The British sort of spoke the good speech, saying man's ingenuity and technology can overcome water variability, right? That was the intent of the canals and the cash crops and all of that. Bringing, no, no, we'll let you pay a lower tax, but we'll keep the tax in cash rather than kind. So you started seeing a I'm trying to look for the right word, a sort of violation of India's water facets, right? Growing crops where they shouldn't be grown, redirecting, shaping water rather than, as for so many centuries we've done, we were shaped by water, right? Now we've
Yeah.
begun to shape water. But if you actually go into it and you look at the primary documents of what the British were really after, they were after a return on capital for British capital, right? So when you read
Yeah.
what people write on the canal colonies, you're talking about 23.5% return on building this canal.
Yeah.
When Pennyquick talks about linking the Periyar to the Vaigai, he's talking about how much return he's going to give, right? So it was saying, look, we're going to give you great technology which gives you mastery over water, but in actuality it is trying to do something else, which is provide return on capital and give a centralized control. But there's only so far you can push India's water, right? Before water starts
Okay.
to reassert itself. And when the climate warms, it really supercharges its warming cycle. And this is a point I really, this was the point I wrote the book for, which is people talking about climate talk in terms of carbon, but the climate itself speaks through water,
Yeah.
right? And rather than making climate conversations elitist and keeping people out of closed rooms, water is a way to make climate change very tangible. And unless people feel it's affecting them, they will not have the motivation to change. So coming back to your point on why are tanks getting encroached, why are communities around those tanks not protesting? In functional tanks, what our institute found was the community would say, "You don't come near our tank, right? This is
Yeah.
our tank. Don't come near it." But in urban context, tanks have become sort of, unsightly, a place for wastewater dumps. And I go into why this has happened, why this transition from the village darling and the village diva to neglected orphan has
Yeah.
happened to our tanks. And it has to do with cash flow.
Explain this.
So tanks before used to give both spiritual perks, right?
Yeah.
So if you did bund cleaning, if you repaired bunds, if you desilted, etc., you would get certain spiritual perks. And it also gave cash flow, like fishing, right? Fishing is a wonderful source of cash flow. You would get lotuses, water for livestock. All these are repetitive cash flow. It happened over time and the community benefited. But again, with the time of the British, we started changing fish varieties. Like around Madurai, we found that earlier we had 11 different types of fish varieties, which varied with the rise and fall of the water levels in the tank. Then we moved to the three carp culture, which began to focus on fish that grow fat fast. And as the catch sizes became larger, only bigger fishermen could bid, not community fishermen. And then what happened is when you centralized it, lawsuits started getting thrown around, right? And then the bureaucrats started getting scared. Why should we allow fishing auctions? And the benefit didn't flow back to the community. So slowly the link between the tank and the community went away. If you live around a lake in Chennai, for instance, what benefit do you get from it? You don't know that it protects you from flood until recently. You didn't know that it recharged your groundwater, and it does. I mean, we found in
Yeah.
our study that living next to a functional tank saved you about 100 rupees a month in just how much water you buy. So all these have become invisible, forgotten, ununderstood. We've forgotten our own water, and we need to remember and reset our relationship.
True, when somebody was talking about urban migration or rural migration towards the urban centers, they said a lot of this migration is also triggered because of the groundwater deficit or the lakes drying up and the ponds drying up, and suddenly it's not livable. Then they said that it's also a catch 22 because those people who were involved in trying to clean the bunds, clear the bunds, maintain the tanks and the ponds and reservoirs, that generation has moved to the cities. So there's nobody there at the in the villages and all to even safeguard these bunds and these reservoirs. But you also write in your book that we can make water a source of income. We can make it commercially viable and also a business proposition or a workable proposition. How can we do that?
Yeah, again, see, we live in a raucous democracy and we live in a young country, and we need jobs. So that's why in this book I've spent not just nearly half the book on solutions, but solutions which really look at jobs alongside water resilience, right? Because if you say, okay, protect the lake, I mean, when there are powerful interests who want that lake for land, you're not going to be able to think. But if you say, okay, a lake can provide you 100 jobs, then you
Wow.
start saying, okay, that becomes interesting, right?
Hmm.
So this is what we found. How can we reimagine some of our solutions in a way that creates jobs, right? So if you look at tanks, and this is again a study that we did, a single tank in Madurai, which went from being dysfunctional to functional, after being provided basic infrastructure like a walking path, places to sit, boating facilities, began to provide 100 jobs, right,
Wow.
from 0 to 100. And there are hundreds, thousands of these lakes scattered around the country. Can we do this? Can we start mating water resilience and jobs? This is the tank tourism policy document that we've shared at multiple levels. This is one thing. You take forests, for instance. Forests are central to India's water, right? I mean, the link is not very well, only now we're beginning to realize how essential forests are. But again, when you look at the valuation of forests, most of the value rests in the timber value of the trees, wherein you're quite literally missing the forest for the trees, right?
Yes.
And the hydrological value provided by forests only about 3% of the value. But can we reimagine these forests, right? In America, these national parks provide a couple of $100 billion of value a year. Why are our forests not doing that? How can we make those forests do that, right? I think there is a lot of reimagination that needs to happen, wherein we unlock the value of forests while keeping the forests and helping value flow to local communities. It's
Hmm.
that's the key point. Cash flow needs to flow to local communities so they become very interested in um,
Yeah.
okay, those forests being intact. Uh, if you try to get a safari booked in Ranthambore, Bandhavgarh, and Kanha, good luck. But if you're trying to, there are forests elsewhere also, there are tigers elsewhere also. Can we develop infrastructure? So, you achieve two goals, and they're not mutually exclusive goals. And I think what that requires is reimagination. And that's just one case study that I've given, and there are so many more in the book.
True, but is there a certain, from the time you started or undertook the study and started looking at it till the time you've now completed the book, do you think there is a shift? There is a certain level of improvement. There are case studies, and somewhere it is getting into a little more of the
Absolutely,
consciousness,
absolutely. I think the
or you think are we going to run out of groundwater by 2030?
So look, again, India is variable, right? There is no one size fit all. So definitely, in some people get it sooner. Okay, it's how the message is conveyed, how much the pain is there. Is there someone who takes leadership, someone who looks like them, who shows how it's done, etc. I think the penny has dropped somewhere in Chennai's head that look, we have to protect our tanks, and in Madurai also we have a system of tanks, and because they've been sort of rejuvenated, we're in good shape. There are lots of parts of it. In some places, groundwater is going to run out, right?
Correct.
There is no, and there may be no other solution to it. And that really depends on how local communities start taking ownership of this problem, because it really is a decentralized problem with no one size fit all.
True. My final question to you: in your book, have you looked at the possibility of interlinking rivers or interlinking canals systems within states to ensure that you have the excess water from a particular region, which receives huge amounts of rainfall in those 100 hours, not just store, but also redirect rather than waste away?
Okay. So I have looked at interlinking in the book. And here's the thing. Yes, it does take into account of evening out India's geographical variability of water. But here's the problem, right? There are two problems to this. One is, where are you going to link rivers? Typically, because of land acquisition issues, which are legendarily tortuous in India, you link them submerging a lot of forest land. And that's not a good thing, because, as I said, you need those forests to stabilize rainwater. So you can't cut your nose to spite your face, because when you're trying to even it out, when you destroy forests, you're not really helping. But let me put a more pragmatic reason, right? There are people, pragmatism, which cuts across all of. There are two objections. Not objections. There are two things that I think we need to think more deeply about. One is, everybody will be very happy to donate their water during the monsoon. Please take,
Yeah.
right? And they'll be very, very happy to give it. But will they give it during the summer when the recipient really wants it? I
Yeah.
think just looking at India's history, it may not really solve the problem that you're trying to solve, because people won't give it when the recipient wants it. People will be giving it. Imagine when Chennai is getting flooded, a canal comes and brings in more water. The Krishna water coming into Pundi, and then you
Yeah,
people get
correct.
it when you don't want. The in Tamil there's a saying that says "Kudukra devam kuriya puchu kudukum." So like that's what's going to happen, and that's a problem. The second issue is, again, when you start, it's a long drawn out process, right? And are we better off putting our political capital and our financial capital on decentralized solutions, which will give you the same bang for the buck in a
Correct.
far quicker time, especially because climate is accelerating water
Yeah.
crises? That's the question. I have objections on pragmatism, and I think forests is an area that we should make sure that we don't connect it, and we shouldn't give up forests, because those are
True. I have
critical.
to admit, I have just perused and some portions of the book, some in the beginning, some in the middle, towards the end. It's very compelling. So I'm going to complete reading this, Mridulaji, and I
Thank you
hope
so much.
more of our viewers who are watching this also decide to get a copy and get a little more into this entire water conscious level. The other thing is, you need to write this book in local languages. It has
I
to be
know.
written. It has to
I
have.
know.
It has to be in Tamil, in Hindi, and in other languages which can be consumed and people can understand the importance of what you're trying to communicate. Thank
Yeah.
you. and convey.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.